Chapter 135. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and immediately withdrew his divine sense. He took a deep breath and tried hard to dispel the lingering reverie in his mind. After his mood stabilized, he shook his head secretly. There was a kind of woman who was a confidant in his heart. When the two were together, there was no worry, and the body and mind were relaxed and peaceful. It was a piece of pure land in a man's heart that could not be desecrated. Bai Suzhen was his confidant. She believed that if he wanted her body, she would not refuse. This method of peeping could be used on any woman, but it was not suitable for her. After more than 4 hours, the female disciple who was ordered to prepare the bath water suddenly rushed in and said excitedly, "Elder Fei, senior sister Furong, she, you should go and have a look." "Got it." Ferdinand waved his hand, and then turned back to glare at Yu Qianqiu fiercely. Then he hurried out. It seemed to tell him that if anything happened to his daughter, just wait and see. Yu Qianqiu judged from the female disciple's expression that it was probably a good thing. Otherwise, she would not be so excited, so he followed her. The two came to a side room one after another. As soon as they entered, Ferdinand suddenly stopped. Yu Qianqiu flashed out from behind him and was also stunned there. A woman was sitting in front of the bronze mirror in a trance. She kept rubbing her face with her palm. When she saw someone coming in, she slowly turned her head and revealed her beautiful appearance. "Damn, this beauty is Furong." Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened. The beauty in front of him blocked her face, but her figure was indeed Furong's figure. It was just that her face seemed to have changed into another person, which was very different from before. Ferdinand trembled all over and nodded with tears in his old eyes. She looks like your mother." Yu Qianqiu looked at him suspiciously. "No wonder you have an affair with your wife. It turns out that your lover is more beautiful than your wife." "Yu Qianqiu." Furong stood up and shouted shyly. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. "So senior martial sister's original appearance is this beautiful, huh? I really didn't expect that." Thinking of the time when he called her ugly in the mulberry garden, he really felt a little embarrassed. Furong immediately lowered her head shyly. A female disciple on the side said, "Elder, I'll help Shiji comb her hair." Ferdinand wiped his tears happily, laughed and said, All right, let's go out." After saying that, he also pulled Yu Qianqiu out. As soon as the two of them came out and walked back to the original room, Ferdinand suddenly turned around and stared at Yu Qianqiu. The smile on his face disappeared. After a long time he said, "How many elixirs have you refined in this furnace?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. It seemed like his daughter's face had been cured. Now that she had nothing to worry about, she wanted to fall out with him. Without changing his expression, he said, "Originally, one furnace was supposed to refine 10 pills, but in the end, 9 pills were wasted. Fortunately, there was still 1 pill left, otherwise senior sister's face." As he said this, he shook his head. 9 out of 10 pills were wasted. Ferdinand raised his eyebrows and didn't show that he believed it. He turned to the side and said leisurely, "I'm afraid it's not an ordinary spirit herb. Otherwise, it definitely won't have such a miraculous effect." "Yes, I believe that senior sister's face can stay young forever," Yu Qianqiu replied lightly. Ferdinand turned around and said, "What kind of spirit herb is it? It can actually stay young forever?" "If Ghost General is right, I believe that not only can it stay young forever, but it can also be immune to all kinds of poisons in the future." Yu Qianqiu stared at him and said slowly, "Ghost General said that the spirit herb is called a dumbra flower. I don't know if Elder Ferdinand has heard of it?" Ferdinand's body shook, and his eyes lit up. After a long time, he returned to normal and sighed. "Treat Furong better. If there's anything I can help with in the future, don't hesitate to find me." "Humph. If you know about the adumbra flower, you should know that it can't be cultivated. Your daughter has already used it, and you still want to bully me? You should know better than me the consequences of using this kind of heaven and earth treasure privately. Old thing, you have to return the favor you owe." Yu Qianqiu nodded calmly and said, "Got it, I'll go back first." After the incident in the demon domain, Fuxian Island gradually returned to normal. In the elixir refinery pavilion, Yu Qianqiu was undoubtedly the most free person. Without Yin Shu's constraints, no one cared about him. In addition, he was famous and was Guan Weiwu's personal disciple, so the elixir refinery pavilion let him do whatever he wanted and didn't arrange anything for him to do. He also kept a low profile and acted alone. He always had a smile when facing everyone, didn't fight with anyone, and didn't conflict with anyone. He was often very generous. As for the disciples of the other branches, he almost didn't interact with them, other than a disciple called Cheng Gingqing from the Secular Objects Hall, who often looked for him. There was also Gu Qingyan from the Cultivation Pavilion. In short, Yu Qianqiu had completely entered a period of hibernation. Behind the scenes that others couldn't see, he was abnormally busy. First, he spent a few months building a majestic hall on the tallest mountain in Utopia. After that, other than concentrating on cultivation, he accompanied Guan Yu to train the troops. In the process, there were definitely some who were disobedient, and Bai Suzhen immediately turned them into ashes. It had to be said that sometimes, killing the chicken to warn the monkey was very useful. At the same time, Yu Qianqiu constantly educated these people on political and ideological issues. Coupled with the generous treatment of spirit stones and spirit pills, the morale of the troops gradually stabilized. Of course, some necessary measures were unavoidable. As for the usual training, he rarely interfered. Instead, he often spent time to change Guan Yu's mindset and taught him alone. His requirement for Guan Yu was that the most important aspect of this small army was their quality. They had to be proficient in assassinations, ambushes, and all sorts of other effective combat methods to kill the enemy. They had to be able to achieve victory once they were deployed. Guan Yu's enthusiasm for these things was also unexpected. He threw himself into it wholeheartedly, and the various special warfare and training methods that Yu Qianqiu explained were even more astonishing. All kinds of advanced ideas and concepts were things that he had never thought of. At the same time, Yu Qianqiu gave Guan Yu a warning. The soldiers are fierce, but the generals are fierce. After the training of the troops got on track, Yu Qianqiu began to spend a lot of time on Qinfeng, personally teaching him alchemy and researching weapon refinement and talisman creation. The method and materials for weapon refinement were bought by Cheng Gingqing from outside. Of course, he also gave him a lot of money for running errands. Cheng Gingqing was never tired of such a good thing. Anyway, it was on the way. As long as you don't talk about it, it's good for everyone. In the blink of an eye, it was time for supporting Immortal Island to distribute the Foundation establishment pills. Yu Qianqiu diverted some of his attention to Ling Feng, and the other two. As expected, the three of them did not disappoint him and all failed. Naturally, the three of them would be expelled from supporting Immortal Island. Yu Qianqiu sat on a stone bench and looked at the three dejected people in front of him. Behind him stood a peerless beauty who was gently massaging his back. This person was none other than Hibiscus. Ever since the scar on her face was healed, Hibiscus finally had the courage to come out and meet people. However, the way she came out was often a straight line. She would go back and forth between Wanfen Garden and Yu Qianqiu's residence. In her eyes, Yu Qianqiu was the only person she could trust. Chapter 136. Every time she came, she would bring some of Yu Qianqiu's favorite food. Once Yu Qianqiu suddenly said, "Furong, you have to improve your cultivation. Maybe I'll need your help in the future." Therefore, other than the appointment time with Yu Qianqiu, Furong spent the rest of her time on cultivation. With the help of the medicinal pills personally refined by Yu Qianqiu, she successfully broke through to the core formation stage. As a result, Ferdinand was overjoyed. It was naturally a good thing to have someone to supervise his daughter's cultivation. In the cultivation world, what was more practical than improving one's own strength? Therefore, he was happy to see his daughter run to Yu Qianqiu. Moreover, he also knew that his daughter would not be able to leave Yu Qianqiu in this life. He also accepted his fate. "When are you leaving?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the three of them and smiled. Ling Feng sighed. "Sigh. I've woken up from my dream. It's time to leave." I think it'll be in a few days. Yu Qianqiu patted Furong on his shoulder and signaled Furong to stop and rest. Furong obediently leaned behind him and looked at the four people sitting around with her bright eyes innocently. Ling Feng and the other two secretly sighed. Look at what kind of life she led. The dignified daughter of the Wanfen Garden's principal elder personally patted her back. Moreover, she was such a beautiful woman. The table was filled with snacks brought by Furong. After Yu Qianqiu personally filled the 4 wine glasses on the table, he asked, "What are your plans after leaving?" The three of them looked at each other and shook their heads with a bitter smile. Ling Feng said with a bleak expression, "The three of us were orphans. We were brought to Fuxian Island when we were young and never left. Now we don't even know what the outside world is like. After leaving, we really don't know what to do." "You don't want to walk the path of cultivation anymore?" Yu Qianqiu held a wine glass and asked. Ling Feng shook her head. "There's no chance. There will never be a chance. 3 foundation establishment pills can't help a disciple who is expelled from the sect. Which sect in the cultivation world would take in the abandoned disciples of supporting Immortal Island?" Hearing this, Beizi picked up the wine cup in front of her and drained it in one gulp. She actually shed tears and cried, "Martial uncle, I really can't accept this. I really can't accept this." Xian Ping drank a cup of wine in a muffled voice. Yu Qianqiu filled up their cups again and said with a smile, "What if we still have a chance after we get out of here? Do you guys want some?" The three of them shuddered and looked at him. Ling Feng pondered for a moment and stood up in surprise. "Does Martial Uncle have a clear path? If you can guide us, the three of us are willing to follow Martial Uncle's orders from now on." Yu Qianqiu smiled without saying a word. He glanced at the other two and raised his cup to drink. Beizi and Xian Ping immediately stood up and said, "Martial Uncle, please show us the way. We are willing to listen to your orders." "It's good to talk to smart people." Yu Qianqiu gave them a thumbs up. Then, he took out a small white porcelain bottle that was sealed and used to store pills, and placed it on the table. He said with a smile, "If the three of you still want to succeed in building your foundation, after you leave supporting Immortal Island, bring this bottle to the capital of Huaxia Empire as soon as possible. Go to the Pillar of State General's office and find a person called Shi Xiaotian. He is the 3rd young master of the general's office. After you find him, tell him that I told you to find him. He will naturally arrange a place for you to stay and wait patiently. When the time comes, someone will come to help you build your foundation. Remember this well and don't forget it." The three of them were pleasantly surprised. They looked at each other and didn't know if this was true or not. Ling Feng took a deep breath and held the porcelain bottle in his hand. This was their only chance. Whether it was true or not, they had to give it a try. He repeated Yu Qianqiu's words again. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he nodded and said, "Martial Uncle, we will remember your words. It's good that you remember it. You will have to grasp the opportunity yourselves." Yu Qianqiu then nodded and gestured for the three of them to sit down. He said, "I heard that there are more than 10 disciples expelled from supporting Immortal Island. If possible, it is best to bring them with you. Consider this a test. Don't let the others know." The three of them exchanged glances and nodded. "Martial Uncle, we understand." A few days later, in front of Penglai Pavilion's main hall, more than 10 dejected disciples boarded their flying magic tools under the supervision of 2 disciples from the Secular Objects Hall. These disciples had stayed on supporting Immortal Island for so many years, but they didn't even have anyone to send them off. On the contrary, Ling Feng and the other two had Yu Qianqiu and Furong to send them off. Seeing this miserable scene, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sigh at the fickleness of the cultivation world. One of the 2 disciples from the Secular Objects Hall was Cheng Gingqing. Yu Qianqiu smiled at him and said, "The 3 of them have lived in the same courtyard with me for many years. You have also seen them many times, so you can be considered acquaintances. Please take care of them on the way. They have old friends in the capital that they are going to seek refuge with. If it is convenient, try to get them to stay close to the capital." "I know. You are so garrulous like an old woman." Cheng Gingqing punched him, and at the same time, he looked at Furong behind Cheng Gingqing meaningfully and shook his head with a smile. Ling Feng and the other two bowed gratefully and said, "Thank you, Marshal Uncle, for sending us off." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at Cheng Yingqing. "Don't thank me, thank him. We still need him to take care of us on the way. Go, go, go. Don't listen to him. Hurry up and go up. There are people watching over there." Cheng Yingqing pouted in the direction of Penglai Pavilion and pushed the three of them onto the flying magic tool. After watching a stream of light fly into the sky, Yu Qianqiu led Furong back to the small courtyard on his sword. With the three of them gone, the place suddenly felt a lot more deserted. Yu Qianqiu sat down on the stone bench and pulled Furong onto his lap. Feeling the elasticity of the heavy weight, he wrapped his arms around her slender waist and caressed her. The latter panicked and pressed his hand down, saying, "Qianqiu, don't. Someone will see." "So it's like that?" Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while and suddenly carried her up, saying, "Then let's go to my room. No one will see there." This caused the latter to scream in fear. Rushing into the room, he closed the door with his foot and threw Furong onto the bed. The two of them laughed and played with each other until their clothes were in a mess. In the end, they had touched all the places they wanted to touch. However, Yu Qianqiu still did not take off her clothes to make the final breakthrough. It was not that he did not want to do it, but when he wanted to do it, Furong always said that she was afraid. Therefore Yu Qianqiu vowed, "I won't force you. When you are not afraid one day, tell me." From then on, every time this happened, Yu Qianqiu would want to slap himself twice. He really didn't know if he was possessed or what was going on. He actually made such an oath, and now he could only slap himself. Thinking about how he was still a virgin after coming to this world for so long. Furong, who was blushing, lazily lay in Yu Qianqiu's arms and said, "Qianqiu, Father wants me to tell you that Fuxian Island will send more disciples to the Cultivation Alliance in a while." Cultivation Alliance? Yu Qianqiu's expression darkened. He sat up. Back in Ongquangsung, after his master Hao Sansi was killed by the Deluo sect, he had handed the matter over to the Cultivation Alliance to handle. In the end, it was left unsettled. He still remembered it. In front of the Pillar of State General's residence in the capital of Huaxia Empire, a dozen travel-worn people gathered at the entrance. They sized up the extraordinary residence and looked at the three people in front of them in confusion. The person in the lead walked up and knocked on the door knocker. After a while, the door was opened. A servant who was guarding the door walked out and asked with a frown, "Who are you looking for?" "We are looking for the third young master of your residence, Shi Xiaotian." The person in the lead smiled and said. The servant looked at them again and asked doubtfully, "Do you know our third young master?" "No, we don't. Please help us inform him that his old friend, Yu Qianqiu, asked us to personally bring something to him." Yu Qianqiu. The servant scratched his head as if he had heard this name before, but he could not remember where. However, his attitude immediately became much better. He nodded and said, "Please wait for a moment, I will go inform him now." After saying that, he closed the door again. The crowd did not wait for long before they heard hurried running sounds from inside. Someone shouted, open the door and welcome the guest." The person outside the door immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 137. The group of people at the entrance was none other than the disciples of Supporting Immortals Island, who had failed to reach Foundation establishment and were expelled from the sect. Leading them was Ling Feng and the other two. They followed Yu Qianqiu's instructions and brought them to the Pillar General's residence. Most of these people had spiritual roots and were brought to Supporting Immortals Island from a young age. Many years had passed, and the youngest among them had not interacted with the secular world for close to 20 years. They were expelled from the sect and had nowhere to go. With Ling Feng and the other two leading the way, they naturally followed them. However, Ling Feng and the other two did not tell them that they were under Yu Qianqiu's arrangements. When they heard the conversation between Ling Feng and the gatekeeper and found out that Yu Qianqiu was involved, they looked at each other in astonishment. Seeing such a rich and powerful residence, the three of them could not help but feel a trace of apprehension. They were a little suspicious of Yu Qianqiu's words. The Pillar General was similar to the Wei and Ping generals. The military power of the Huaxia Empire was divided among the three of them. Their status was not something ordinary people could hope to achieve. They had heard of this before, and did not believe that Yu Qianqiu would be related to such a person. However, since things had come to this, they could only brace themselves and give it a try. When they heard the shout from inside, the three of them finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was clear that Yu Qianqiu's name was indeed effective. The vermilion-red door of the residence let out a dull sound and quickly opened. 2 rows of servants stood on either side. A handsome young man with a golden crown in his hair and embroidered robes, with a jade belt around his waist, walked out and looked around joyfully. When he saw the travel-worn appearance of the group, he was slightly taken aback. He paused for a moment before asking doubtfully, "I am sure Xiaotian. Are you all looking for me?" When he heard the servant's report, he did not think much of it. He felt that the servant was looking down on him. At this moment, he also suspected that these people were sent by that person. Otherwise, why would they be in such a sorry state? After being in a rich and powerful family for so long, he had forgotten how he looked when he returned from Ongquangsung. He was even worse than them. The expression of the servant who went to report sank. They had actually lied to him. They grew up overseas and did not have much experience. This was the first time they saw such a dignified young master. Looking at themselves, they felt a little resentful. Ling Feng cupped his fist and said, "You are sure Xiaotian. It is Uncle Master Yu Qianqiu who ordered us to find you." "Uncle Master?" Sure Xiaotian looked him up and down. He seemed to be slightly older than Yu Qianqiu. He was a little worried, so he probed, "Where are you from?" "Supporting Immortals Island," Ling Feng said with a little pride. As soon as he said this, everyone became confident. Although they were expelled from the sect, the position of the sect was enough for them to be proud of. The name of the #1 sect in the cultivation world was not just for show. Sure sect of the sect of the other sect. Excited. Sure sect out of the sect, disciple sect of the sect of the sect of the other of sect. As he spoke, he looked at the servants on both sides, extended his hand, and made an inviting gesture. "This is not the place to talk. Everyone, please follow me." The decency of a wealthy family in the secular world was indeed a big blow to these people. It was a completely different concept from the fairyland of the Supporting Immortals Island. Perhaps it was because they had stayed in the Supporting Immortals Island for a long time, but their sense of beauty had completely changed. They were a little surprised by the luxury of the general's residence. They constantly looked around and praised in their hearts. Sure Xiaotian didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest. Not only did he lead the way, he also kept making inviting gestures. Sometimes, the servants passing by couldn't help but glance at him. Why was the third young master so polite to a bunch of country bumpkins? The former led everyone to the back garden, where Yu Qianqiu used to live. However, it had become his residence now, and the garden was still a forbidden area. Other than him, no one was allowed to enter. In the small courtyard of the back garden, the pile of spirit stones that Yu Qianqiu left for him was still there. Even though everyone came from the world's #1 cultivation sect, they had never seen such a big pile of spirit stones before. Moreover, these were just some ordinary disciples. They were all speechless. As expected of a wealthy family, even the spirit stones were exposed so casually. However, they didn't know Sure Xiaotian's pain. Seeing these spirit stones every day was torture to him. In the cultivation world, it was a good thing. But in the secular world, people would have to think twice before exchanging it for a meal. Moreover, Sure Xiaotian hadn't built his foundation, so he didn't dare to absorb the spiritual energy inside. Normally, he only dared to look at it but didn't dare to use it. After inviting the guests from the Supporting Immortals Island to sit in the hall, Sure Xiaotian impatiently asked Ling Feng, "Old, why didn't your martial uncle you come? What did he ask you to bring me?" The first thing that came to his mind was the foundation building pill. Ling Feng told him what Yu Qianqiu wanted him to find Sure Xiaotian. Then, he took out the porcelain bottle that he carefully kept and gave it to Sure Xiaotian. Once Sure Xiaotian received it, he immediately opened the seal and poured the contents into his palm a few times. However, he realized that there was nothing inside. He couldn't help but look at Ling Feng in confusion. Ling Feng and the other two's expressions changed as well. It was actually an empty bottle. Yu Qianqiu actually asked them to bring an empty bottle as a gift? Shi Xiaotian squinted his eyes and looked into the bottle. There was indeed nothing inside. He then put it under his nose and sniffed it. He couldn't help but frown. There was nothing inside other than the smell of blood. He slowly raised his head and looked at the crowd. He said indifferently, "What is the meaning of this? Are you trying to fool me? Or is the thing inside the bottle being hidden by someone? Give me an explanation." He had been a person of status for a long time. When he was serious, he could indeed put some pressure on others. The atmosphere in the hall became heavy. The other disciples also looked at Ling Feng and the other two. Ling Feng snatched the bottle from his hand. After checking it again, he realized that there was nothing inside. He muttered, "How can this be? I've never opened the bottle before. Could it be that martial uncle you gave us an empty bottle? He came all the way here to deliver such a small empty bottle? Do you really think I'm an idiot?" Shi Xiaotian glanced at everyone coldly and said in a deep voice, "I think everyone should first prove your identity. Otherwise, my general's residence isn't a place that you can come and go as you please. Speak. Who are you people? How do you know that I know Yu Qianqiu?" He shouted. "Yo, I haven't seen you for a few years. Your temper has grown." Suddenly, a mocking voice came from the back of the hall. Shi Xiaotian suddenly turned around and shouted, "Who is it? Get out here." Following a burst of laughter, a person swayed out from the back of the hall. He stared at Shi Xiaotian with a smile and sighed. "You have guts. You actually dare to speak to me like this. Why? Can't you recognize my voice after being separated for a few years?" Everyone stood up. This person wasn't a stranger to everyone. He was a famous person on supporting Immortals Island. He was once an honored guest of the State Pillar General's residence. He was Yu Qianqiu. All the disciples bowed and said, "Martial uncle Yu." Ling Feng and the other two looked at him in disbelief. Wasn't he on supporting Immortals Island? How did he come here in a blink of an eye? Boss, Shi Xiaotian said in shock. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand to indicate that there was no need to be so polite. He turned to Shi Xiaotian and patted his shoulder with a smile. "Young man, you have quite a temper. How dare you shout at me?" Shi Xiaotian stuttered for a long time. In the end, he bowed with a surprised expression. "Boss." Yu Qianqiu turned around with a smile. He walked to the chair in the main hall and sat down. He looked at everyone. Chapter 138. Seeing everyone's doubtful expressions, Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly. In fact, he had already heard the conversation between him and Shi Xiaotian. His gaze landed on the porcelain bottle in Ling Feng's hand, and his smile widened. He had been cultivating arduously for more than a year, trying to make various breakthroughs. One time, he had cultivated the Guoyuan sword technique, wanting to make a breakthrough, but in his anxiety, he had ended up injuring himself. When he returned to supporting Immortal Island, he realized that there were bloodstains on his clothes. So he casually tossed them down the Alchemy Pavilion's mountain and did not take it to heart. A few days later, when he was cultivating in Utopia, he unintentionally realized that he could sense the scene in an unfamiliar place outside. This feeling could only be felt when he had entered Utopia the last time. Curious, he locked onto it with his divine sense and tried using the method to exit. In the end, he discovered that he was already in the back mountain of the Alchemy Pavilion. When he discovered the blood-stained shirt that he had abandoned previously, he immediately thought of a possibility. He reckoned that it was a benefit brought about by his cultivation breaking through again. Therefore, he dripped his blood in several places on supporting Immortal Island to test it out. Indeed, he could easily sense the surroundings of every drop of blood essence in Utopia. After repeated attempts, he could use Utopia as a medium to quickly appear where there was blood essence. The porcelain bottle that he had asked Ling Feng, and the other two, to bring did not contain anything other than a drop of his blood essence. His main purpose was to test Utopia's long-distance teleportation ability. He had asked the three of them to bring that drop of blood essence to the National Pillar General's residence, which was why he could appear here. Of course, this was his secret, and it was not convenient for him to let the people in front of him know. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Ling Feng and the other two and said indifferently, Ling Feng, I remember the three of you saying that as long as I can help you succeed in building your foundation, you'll be willing to listen to my orders. Does that still count? The three of them looked at each other and thought about how Yu Qianqiu had been able to leave supporting Immortal Island secretly and appear here silently. Since he had such means, he was definitely not lying about building his foundation. Therefore, they bowed in unison and said, Of course it counts. The other disciples were shocked when they heard that Yu Qianqiu could actually help the three of them build their foundation. For a moment, everyone's thoughts became active, and they looked at the three of them enviously. Shi Xiaotian was also a little excited. Since Boss had the ability to help them build their foundations, he would naturally be able to help himself. However, he had been with Yu Qianqiu for more than a year, and was very familiar with him. He knew that there was more to this sentence. Yu Qianqiu nodded. He looked at the others and smiled. What are your plans? Are you willing to serve me like the other three? Everyone looked at each other, their expressions becoming excited. Someone stepped forward and bowed, saying, Martial Uncle Yu, if you can guarantee that this disciple will successfully build his foundation, this disciple is willing to listen to Martial Uncle's orders. I always pay what I say. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, If you can't successfully build your foundation, you naturally don't need to listen to my orders. And you also don't need to take my words seriously. Go do what you need to do. Heh. Is there anyone among you who is willing to be like him? As he said that, he took out a few foundation-building pills that were shrouded in purple mist. Everyone's eyes lit up. Apart from Shi Xiaotian, everyone had seen them before, so they naturally knew that these were foundation-building pills. Shi Xiaotian also naturally understood from everyone's gazes. In an instant, the crowd's emotions flared up. Who wouldn't want to make such a foolproof deal? Even if they couldn't successfully build their foundation, they wouldn't lose anything. They immediately stepped forward and bowed, saying, If we can successfully build our foundation, this disciple is willing to listen to Martial Uncle Yu's orders. Since there were foundation-building pills, Boss definitely wouldn't forget about them. Shi Xiaotian stood at the side very confidently, not saying a word. Good, 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 Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, but he snorted coldly in his heart. As expected, they were all people who refused to suffer losses. Each of them emphasized that they would only listen to his orders after they successfully built their foundation. They all thought that he was a philanthropist. Very good. He placed the few foundation-building pills in his hand on the tea table beside him. Then he took out a whole bunch and placed them on the table, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, Words are no proof. Those who are willing to listen to my orders will first take one as proof. If one foundation-building pill is not enough, you can still come to me to take it. As he said that, he took out another handful from his storage bag. Shi Xiaotian's jaw dropped as he watched. He thought to himself, Boss is indeed boss. The foundation-building pills that An Kuang-sung treats as treasure are actually given out by Boss as wedding candies. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Finally, someone couldn't resist the temptation and walked over to Yu Qianqiu and bowed deeply. When the latter nodded, he excitedly took one and retreated to the side, as if he was afraid that someone would snatch it from him. Sometimes, one was afraid that no one would take the lead. Since someone took the lead, everyone would naturally follow suit, taking turns to bow and salute, then unceremoniously took the pills and retreated. In the blink of an eye, there were only 11 foundation-building pills left on the tea table. Yu Qianqiu looked at Shi Xiaotian, Ling Feng, and the other two who didn't follow the crowd's bad example. He smiled and said, Xiaotian, take the foundation-building pills on the table and share them with those three brothers. For people actually had to share 11 foundation-building pills. Everyone's face was filled with envy. Yes, such a good thing. Shi Xiaotian couldn't hold back the smile on his face anymore. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue, no longer looking like a noble young master. Holding the foundation-building pills in his hand, he walked in front of Ling Feng and the other 2. Without saying a word, he gave each of them 3 foundation-building pills. He held 2 and was about to retreat. Who knew that the 3 of them wouldn't take it? They each wanted to give one to Shi Xiaotian, but the latter was determined not to accept it. Looking at the adult version of Kong Rong, Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. This daddy here has plenty of foundation-building pills. Why do I need you guys to be good people? His face darkened and he shouted, "All right, stop being disgusting." The 4 of them retreated embarrassedly. Yu Qianqiu stood up and looked around at everyone. Expressionlessly he said, "I don't like empty promises. The foundation-building pills in everyone's hands are proof of my advance payment. But you guys can't just say empty promises. You have to show me some sincerity. What do you guys say?" Everyone looked at each other. They were all disciples who were chased out of Fuxian Island. Other than the pitiful amount of spirit stones they had, they really couldn't take out anything else to show their sincerity. They didn't know what to say. There really wasn't a free lunch in this world. Shi Xiaotian looked at the foundation-building pills in his hand. His face twitched unnaturally. Just as he took a step forward and called out, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "We'll talk about the 4 of you later." Heh. Nobody said anything. Yu Qianqiu crossed his arms in front of his chest and smiled. "Then I'll take the initiative to ask you guys for something. Something that all of you have, how about it? Something that everyone has?" Everyone looked at themselves and suddenly felt a chill run down their spines. A disciple came out and bowed. "Uncle Master Yu, I wonder what we have that can catch your eye." "Haha, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not interested in your body parts. I just want something that doesn't matter. For example," Yu Qianqiu paused and smiled. "For example, give me your natal primordial spirit. With this proof, I can be at ease." "What?" everyone exclaimed. Their faces turned pale. If they handed over their natal primordial spirit, wouldn't their lives be in danger? That disciple bowed again and said, "Uncle Master, you're joking too much. If that's the case, then I don't want this foundation-building pill anymore." As he spoke, he walked to the side of the tea table and returned the foundation establishment pill. Then a few more people gritted their teeth and walked out to return the foundation-building pill. The rest of them were obviously hesitant. Yu Qianqiu looked at them coldly and suddenly laughed. "You guys really don't stand on ceremony. You guys take my things as you please and return them as you please. Since you guys don't stand on ceremony, then I won't stand on ceremony either. Humph. All of you who took my foundation-building pill, leave your natal primordial spirit behind. Don't even think about leaving." Just as he finished speaking, among the people who were still holding on to the foundation-building pill, someone suddenly leaped out of the hall. In the blink of an eye, he was about to jump over the wall. It seemed like he wanted to escape with the pill. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and narrowed his eyes. Chapter 139. Clang. A cold light suddenly flashed in front of everyone's eyes, heading straight for the disciple, who was about to jump over the wall. The cold light pierced through the person's figure, causing a flower of blood to blossom in the air. The disciple lost his balance and let out a miserable scream that echoed throughout the general's residence. Before the scream had even subsided, a second, third, fourth, one after another, cold lights flashed out from the hall. Their target was still the disciple who was still in the air. Nearly 100 cold lights swarmed over like a flock of crows fighting for food. In a few blinks of an eye, the scream stopped and the disciple could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a bloody mist in the air. The cold lights were faintly discernible, and occasionally, pieces of cloth would fall. Suddenly, nearly 100 cold lights seemed to have received an order and shot out from the bloody mist, shooting into the hall. Everyone followed the direction of the cold lights, and one by one, they entered the storage pouch on Yu Qianqiu's waist. One of the cold lights slowed down and turned into a flying sword that flew around Yu Qianqiu's body. After a few rounds, it flipped over, and with a clang sound, it went straight into the sword sheath on Yu Qianqiu's back. Heavens! Only now did everyone realize that the nearly 100 cold lights were all flying swords. They had never seen anyone control so many flying swords at once. A gust of wind blew outside, causing the leaves on the trees in the courtyard to rustle. Everyone looked over, and saw the bloody mist being blown away by the wind. The scattered pieces of cloth on the ground were blown away, and the walls were dyed with a layer of blood. A thought flashed through everyone's mind. Not a single corpse left. Yu Qianqiu stared at the blood stains on the wall, and the pieces of cloth on the ground. He felt slightly regretful. The power of these 100 flying swords was far from what he had imagined. Otherwise, there shouldn't be any blood stains and pieces of cloth left behind. They should have all been turned into ashes. What happened just now, although it was said to be slow, it was actually only a matter of a few moments. The hall became completely silent. None of the disciples dared to make a sound. They were all intimidated by the power of the group of swords. Those who had the same thought turned pale and completely gave up. They knew that there was no way they could escape this kind of attack. Was this the power of a foundation establishment cultivator? Shi Xiaotian looked at the silent Yu Qianqiu and clenched his fists tightly. His face was flushed, and he was actually trembling with excitement. The goal that the two of them had been fighting for many years had been realized by boss before him. Who dares to fight here? Do you want to die? A loud shout rang out, and then 7 figures appeared on the courtyard wall. 7 middle-aged men in plain robes with sharp eyes stood on the wall of the courtyard and observed the situation inside. Do you want to die? Yu Qianqiu was slightly annoyed. 7 cold rays of light shot out from his storage bag at lightning speed towards the 7 of them. Shi Xiaotian suddenly shouted, "Boss, help!" The 7 flying swords were pressed against the throats of those 7 people. If Shi Xiaotian had not shouted in time, there would have been a bloody hole in their necks. The faces of the 7 people on the wall immediately turned ashen, not daring to move. How could a person who could use a flying sword be ordinary? Yu Qianqiu coldly stared at Shi Xiaotian. The latter smiled bitterly and begged, "Boss, please let them go. They are not ordinary servants. They are the retainers of the general's estate. They have been loyal to my family for generations, and are my father's most trusted subordinates. They have been protecting the safety of the estate and my family for a long time. They didn't mean to offend you, boss." Yu Qianqiu thought about it, and felt that it made sense. They had probably rushed over after hearing that disciple's scream. He looked back at the 7 people on the wall, and saw that they were all standing there, giving off the airs of heroes. However, their faces were pale from fear. He nodded slightly and said, "Tell them not to tell anyone about what happened here." The 7 cold rays of light returned to his storage bag. "Don't worry, boss. They will know even if you don't tell them." Shi Xiaotian turned around and walked into the courtyard. He cupped his hands towards the 7 people on the wall and said, "7 uncles, please leave. There is nothing wrong here, don't worry." The 7 of them also knew the rules of the estate. No one was allowed to come here. If they hadn't heard the scream, they wouldn't have rushed over. The leader in the middle looked at the bloodstains at his feet. He looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting high up in the hall, and bowed to Shi Xiaotian. "Third young master, be careful. We will leave first." The 7 of them returned to the courtyard. This was just a small episode. When Shi Xiaotian turned around and returned to the hall, he was instantly stunned. There was a big group of people just now, but now, only Yu Qianqiu and Ling Feng were left. Ling Feng and the other 2 looked at Yu Qianqiu in shock. Just now, Yu Qianqiu's figure flashed through the crowd, and everywhere he went, people disappeared into thin air. More than 10 people disappeared just like that. They could see it clearly, but they were confused by it. Ling Feng pointed at the place where the people disappeared and said in shock, "Martial uncle, they? Don't worry, they are fine. I just sent them to another place." Yu Qianqiu smiled. These people were all Chen Feng's assistants. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Chen Feng to guarantee the logistics of the small army alone. After sending them to Utopia, his sister would naturally control their natal primordial spirits first. "Martial uncle, this. The 3 of them clearly found it hard to accept this reality. "All right, you don't have to call me martial uncle anymore. Just call me boss like little Tian." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. "Moreover, I have already reached the core formation stage. Calling me martial uncle is a bit outdated. I should be calling you grandmaster. But you are no longer disciples of Fuxian Island, so you can forget about calling me grandmaster. Just call me boss." The 4 of them were stunned. He had already reached the core formation stage. Shi Xiaotian said in surprise. Boss, you have really reached the core formation stage? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him and waved his hand. Let's not talk about this. While I am here, I can protect you. The four of you should hurry up and build your foundation. After that, I have something for you to do. The four of them nodded in surprise and sat down cross-legged in the hall. They consumed the pills and focused on refining them. Not long after, the painful process of building their foundation gradually appeared on the four of them. Yu Qianqiu sat down at the side and looked at the four of them silently. He already had plans for the four of them. He needed them to run around and do some things for him outside. As long as they did not enter Utopia, there was no need to strip away their natal primordial spirits. Otherwise, it would be easy for people with high cultivation levels to see through them. As for Shi Xiaotian, he had entered Utopia once, but he had been trapped in an array and did not know anything. Among the four of them, Shi Xiaotian was the most talented. Yu Qianqiu gave him another foundation establishment pill, and he succeeded in building his foundation with only 3. Although Ling Feng and Bei Zi had succeeded with 3 pills each, they had also used 3 pills on the supporting immortal island. Lu Xianping, on the other hand, had to use 5 pills to succeed. Shi Xiaotian did not say anything. After Ling Feng and Bei Zi succeeded, they tried their best to suppress their excitement. They knelt in front of Yu Qianqiu and said some words of gratitude. Xianping, who succeeded in the end, kowtowed 3 times without saying a word. Then, Shi Xiaotian led the 3 of them to wash up and stood in front of Yu Qianqiu in high spirits. Ling Feng and the other 2 looked at Yu Qianqiu as if they were looking at their parents again. It was difficult for outsiders to understand their feelings of being pulled back from the brink of despair. However, this was what Yu Qianqiu needed after years of planning. This is a storage bag for you. Yu Qianqiu threw a bag to Shi Xiaotian. When Shi Xiaotian caught it, he was stunned at first. Then he burst into laughter and thanked him profusely. Thank you, boss. Thank you, boss. He had been drooling over this legendary item for a long time. What are you laughing at? Yu Qianqiu's words immediately made him stand to the side, but he still kept touching the bag in his hand. Yu Qianqiu tapped his finger on the tea table beside him and pointed at the 4 jade archives, 4 large porcelain bottles, and 4 swords on the table. The jade disc contains supporting immortal islands supporting immortal sword technique, and the bottle contains vitality pills. Each of you, take them and cultivate diligently. Don't be lazy. The 4 of them were pleasantly surprised. They had just built their foundation, and now, Yu Qianqiu had prepared everything they needed. Where else could they find such a good boss? The 4 of them took their things and thanked him profusely. Shi Xiaotian laughed so hard that he almost fainted. He hugged the pile of things, his mouth wide open. Happiness came too suddenly, and there was nothing he could do about it. However, he did not notice that Yu Qianqiu's expression gradually darkened when he saw Shi Xiaotian's behavior. Chapter 140. Ling Feng tugged at him, and Shi Xiaotian immediately reacted. He smiled awkwardly and placed the items in his hands into his storage pouch. Frivolous, Yu Qianqiu harumphed and looked at them for a while before saying, "There are some things I need you to do. Ling Feng, the 3 of you will stay here for now. Once your cultivation reaches a certain level, the 3 of you will split up and travel around the Huaxia Empire, cultivating while traveling. First, to broaden your horizons, and second, to gather some disciples with spiritual roots. Don't worry about what I do. In short, as long as they are not affiliated with any sect, regardless of their age, bring them all here. The more the better. I have a use for them. Remember, try to keep a low profile, and don't let the other sects find out. Oh right, if you don't have any money in the secular world, you can ask little Tian for it. I believe the general's mansion is not short of money. This is what I want the 3 of you to do, don't slack off." Shi Xiaotian's face twitched unnaturally. Ling Feng and the other 2 looked at each other. Traveling and cultivating at the same time. There was actually such a good thing. However, from Yu Qianqiu's expression, it seemed like this matter was very important. They immediately cupped their fists and said, "Boss, we understand." Yu Qianqiu nodded, and took out 4 small silver balls. He passed them to the 4 and said, "These are hollow inside. I have placed something inside. If you encounter danger outside and can't save yourself, you can use your divine sense to check. When the time comes, someone will come to save you. Remember to keep it well." Something that could save lives was indeed a good thing. The 4 carefully kept it. Shi Xiaotian looked at the 3 of them. It seemed like they had all been assigned tasks, except for him. This was too much of a blow to his confidence. He couldn't help but ask, "Boss, what should I do?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and said coldly, "Go do what you need to do. Do your old profession." Shi Xiaotian was startled and said, "Boss, what old profession do I have?" "Yes, why not?" Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder and said, "Your matter is very important. You should use your identity as the general's 3rd young master to befriend the nobles in the capital. Don't neglect eating, drinking, and playing." Ling Feng and the other 2 turned their heads to the side. Shi Xiaotian's face darkened, and he said stiffly, "Boss, you call this a very important matter?" "Yes, very important." Yu Qianqiu glared fiercely at him, his expression solemn as he said, "I want you to thoroughly investigate all the officials of the 5th rank and above in the Huaxia Empire, as well as their families. Then record everything down for me." As he spoke, he handed several jade archives to Miao Yi. Shi Xiaotian took the jade archive and stood rooted to the ground. A thought flashed through his mind. Was boss planning to rebel? Otherwise, why would a cultivator want this thing? Seeing his expression, Yu Qianqiu knew what he was thinking. He smiled and said, "Don't think too much. It's not what you think. You'll know when the time comes. All right, I still have some matters to attend to. Just do as I say." Hearing his words, Shi Xiaotian felt relieved. He cupped his fists at Ling Feng and the other 2 and said, "Understood." Another night passed, and the sky outside was already beginning to brighten. Yu Qianqiu walked into the courtyard, and the long sword on his back was unsheathed with a chong sound. With his hands behind his back, he turned into a streak of light and flew away. The 4 who were sending him off were fascinated by the sight. Shi Xiaotian even cried out, "Boss, you're too awesome. This won't do. I must learn this as soon as possible." On a mountaintop on the outskirts of the capital, Yu Qianqiu stood silently for a long while. His body was already drenched from the dew. At this moment, the rays of the rising sun were so blinding that he had to close his eyes. He stood there, waiting for the sun to rise. Everything was bathed in a layer of gold. He turned to look at the densely populated capital of Huaxia, and mumbled, "So many beauties have fallen to the hands of countless heroes. Since the heavens sent me here, I'd be letting myself down if I don't do something. Xiaotian, if you were to sit on the throne one day, I wonder how you'd feel?" Facing the rising sun, he stretched lazily, thinking about the place he was going to. He couldn't help but feel a little excited. Time really passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost 10 years. He wondered how his father, who had helped him clean up the murder scene, was doing. And that crybaby mother. Yu Qianqiu grinned, and a hint of anticipation appeared on his face. He unsheathed his long sword and left with him. In a small forest outside Swallow City, Yu Qianqiu took a look at the surroundings. It seemed like this was the place where he had opened his eyes back then. He slowly walked out, and walked toward the ancient city gate where people and carriages came and went. It was very familiar, and not much had changed. It was still the same. It was rare for him to come out, and now that he could use the kinesis flight technique, transportation was much more convenient. This time, he wanted to go home to take a look. Walking on the streets of Swallow City, there were all kinds of shops, and it was a bustling scene. Yu Qianqiu sighed with emotion as he relived this familiar scene. Suddenly, he realized that many people were looking at him with strange gazes. He thought to himself, "It's impossible that they know me. I left home at the age of 16, and it's been almost 10 years since then. My appearance has changed a lot." Thinking about it, he felt relieved. It was probably because he was carrying a sword on his back and carrying a bag on his waist that looked a little weird. If he had known earlier, he would have kept it first. He came to a stop in front of a rich and powerful mansion. The plaque on the door read "Yu Manor" in gold. He had finally arrived home. Looking at the bright and clean appearance of the house, it was obvious that there were no signs of decline. It was easy to imagine that the family head here had taken good care of the whole house. Climbing up the steps, just as he was about to enter, he saw the servant guarding the door walk out and block him with hostility. He shouted, "Where did you come from, evil person?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He was actually blocked by a servant when he entered his own house. His gaze followed the servant's gaze and landed on the hilt of the sword on his back. F***ck. A person carrying a sword is an evil person? Isn't this servant's foresight a little too bad? What's wrong with father? Why did he choose such a person to guard the door? Damn it, you even dare to block the eldest young master's way. I'll fire you later. Just as he was about to lose his temper, he remembered that this was his own house. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile. I didn't think that after leaving home for almost 10 years, I wouldn't even be able to enter the house. Who are you? I remember that Uncle Fu used to be the gatekeeper. Hearing him say this, the servant was stunned as well. He looked him up and down, and only then did he realize that there was some resemblance between his brows and the old master's. Bewildered, he asked, You're the eldest young master? I am. Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled. He then asked, Who are you? I haven't seen you before. I. Only now did the servant realize that he had provoked the eldest young master. He stuttered for a while before bowing and saying, Uncle Fu is my father, this little one is Fu Qing. Saying this, he quickly opened the door and said, Eldest young master, please come in. As soon as he finished speaking, Fu Qing ran into the mansion while shouting, Eldest young master is back, eldest young master is back. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Damn it. Why did he have to be so ostentatious? Then he shook his head with a bitter smile and walked in. The result of Fu Qing's loud shout was that the richest mansion in Swallow City immediately boiled over. Yu Qianqiu walked through the porch and came to the courtyard. He saw a group of people coming out of the main hall. He could vaguely recognize some of them as relatives of his family. The man and woman standing at the front were none other than his father and mother. Yu Qianqiu was a little excited. He strode forward and knelt down in front of the two. He kowtowed 3 times and said, Son Yu Qianqiu greets father and mother. Chapter 141. 2 pairs of hands helped him up. It was his parents. The family of 3 looked at each other. Yu Changui, whose sideburns already had some gray hair, held his arm and patted his shoulder, saying, It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Shui Ernyang threw herself into his arms and started crying. She wailed, It's all your father's fault. My son has been gone for so many years. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and awkwardly looked at his father, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He then pushed Shui Ernyang away and said, Mother, don't cry. I'm back now. Yu Changgui's eyes were a little red. He pulled his wife away from his son and said, What are you doing? Why are you crying as soon as your son is back? Aren't you purposely making your son worry? Shui Ernyang struggled free and pulled Yu Qianqiu. She cried, Chou, it's good that you're back. You have to save your younger brother. You have to save your younger brother. The crying stopped abruptly. Shui Ernyang was so sad that she fainted. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He quickly held his mother and carried her. He walked towards his parents' room with familiarity. The group of people followed behind him. When they reached his parents' room, he placed his mother on the bed. He grabbed his mother's hands and infused 2 streams of vital energy into his mother's body, quickly dispersing the pent-up air in her chest. Shui Ernyang slowly woke up. When she saw Yu Qianqiu, she started crying again. She was already crying like this. If she cried any more, she would hurt her spirit. Yu Qianqiu immediately placed a finger on his mother's forehead. Shui Ernyang immediately fell asleep. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief and shouted, Someone! A young maidservant looked at the silent old master and trembled as she walked to Yu Qianqiu's side and said timidly, Eldest young master. Yu Qianqiu took out an origin chi pill and handed it to her. When Madam wakes up, dissolve this pill in a bowl of warm water and feed it to Madam. Don't forget. The maid quickly complied. Yu Changui had been doing business for so many years. At this time, his attention had always been on his son. He saw that his son was nimble in ordering people around. His expression and behavior vaguely had the aura of a superior. He also had a few methods to treat his wife. Obviously, he had lived a good life outside. When he left, he was only 16 years old. Now his bearing was steady and his face resolute. The immaturity of the past had faded, and he was already an adult. "Is your mother okay?" "I'm fine. I'm just a little sad. I'll be fine after taking some medicine." Yu Qianqiu stood up and turned around. He stared at his father and frowned. "Father, did I hear wrongly? Mother seemed to have asked me to save my younger brother. What's going on?" He didn't know that in the second year after he left, after giving birth to her first child, Shui'ernyang, who had been infertile for many years, actually gave birth to a younger brother. Yu Changgui sighed. His eldest son left, but God gave him a younger son. It could be said that it was God's will. But this matter of the clam-forming pearls was really a little difficult to talk about in front of his son. "Father, what's wrong? Is there something inconvenient to tell your son?" Yu Qianqiu was a little unhappy. Yu Changgui shook his head and smiled bitterly. He slowly explained the cause of the matter. "In the second year after you left, your mother gave birth to a younger brother. His name is Yu Wuqiu. He is now 8 years old. But a few days ago, your younger brother suddenly disappeared. Yesterday, someone sent a letter saying that your younger brother had been kidnapped by them. They wanted us to prepare 10,000 taels of gold and come to collect it today." Yu Qianqiu nodded his head in acknowledgement. He indeed didn't expect to have a younger brother, but the two of them had been married for a long time. When he left, they weren't even 40 years old. It wasn't strange for them to have another child. But what was wrong with the Yu clan's descendants? The eldest was kidnapped once, and now the second was kidnapped again. Were the Yu clan's descendants so easy to kidnap? Who knew if there would be more thieves? It seems like the Yu clan's wealth is something that people are jealous of. Mother's maiden family has no one left. I wonder if our Yu clan's relatives. Hee. It's really hard to say. I believe father isn't a foolish person and should have some idea. Yu Qianqiu sneered. Just now, he seemed to have seen a large group of Yu clan's relatives. When they saw him, some of them had strange expressions. Yu Changgui said in a gloomy tone, "I already had my suspicions. Some people probably think that I only know how to do business and not kill people. I know you're not a good person. Otherwise, your business wouldn't be so big." Yu Qianqiu smirked and asked, "Did the kidnappers report their names?" "No." Yu Changgui shook his head and said, "They said that they will send someone to check on the ransom today and tell them the location of the transaction. When the time comes, they will hand over the kidnappers." As he spoke, he suddenly stared at his son and asked, "Qianqiu, you've been cultivating for so many years. Have you learned any immortal techniques?" "I didn't cultivate. That's what soul formation cultivators do. We're just cultivators." Yu Qianqiu smiled. There was no need to tell such words to his father. Of course, he knew what his father was thinking, and it was none other than him trying to utilize some immortal techniques to rescue Chen Hao. He didn't answer directly and said, "Father, don't worry. As long as my brother is fine, I guarantee that you won't have to pay a single cent, and my brother will come back safely." Yu Changgui nodded happily. The father and son chatted as they walked out of the bedroom. When they came to the courtyard outside, there was a large group of clan members and servants standing there. Seeing the father and son come out, an old man in the middle who seemed to be the oldest asked, "Changgui, how is second mother? Do you need to call a doctor?" Yu Changgui bowed and said, "Thank you for asking, clan leader. Second mother is just a little sad. She will be fine after a good sleep. Qianqiu, come and greet clan leader." Yu Qianqiu didn't have a good impression of this group of clan members. In his memory, his father lost his parents and was extremely poor. None of the clan members helped him. Later on, his father received help from his mother's family and relied on his own hard work to have such a large business today. As a result, this group of clan members flocked to him like ducks after hearing the news. They were really powerful. However, the Chinese had a strong sense of clan. Yu Qianqiu didn't want his father to be embarrassed, so he walked over and bowed. Yu Qianqiu greets clan leader. The clan leader nodded and said, I heard that you went out to learn martial arts in the past. I wonder what martial arts you learned? Have you returned after completing your martial arts? Look at the sword on your back. Did you learn some martial arts? Yu Qianqiu knew that his parents didn't spread the news of his cultivation. He smiled indifferently and said, I didn't learn anything practical. I just went out for a walk. I happened to know that some cowardly scoundrels wanted to harm my family, so I specially bought this sword to deter them. The clan leader stroked his long beard and said, Very good. He didn't say anything else. However, a middle-aged man beside him walked to Yu Changgui's side and said darkly, Brother Changgui, I've seen eldest brother's son in the past. Why does he look nothing like him now? Your family is rich, so you have to be careful. What he meant was to tell Yu Changgui that his youngest son had just been kidnapped. His eldest son, whom he hadn't heard from for many years, was here. Furthermore, there was a difference in his appearance. Be careful that someone had designs on your family's wealth. Brother, don't worry. He's definitely my eldest son. Yu Changgui replied in a deep voice. In her heart, she was a little unhappy. How could her own son not know? Not to mention anything else, just based on the fact that her son could say, Mother's maiden family has no one left. I don't know, are you family's ancestral relatives? These words were known to the heavens, the earth, you, and I, and only the person involved could understand the profound meaning behind it. It was clear that this was undoubtedly her eldest son. Moreover, as a father, how could he not know the minute details of his son's appearance? Father, who is this elder? Yu Qianqiu looked at that person with interest and asked. Chapter 142. Qianqiu, don't be rude. This is the patriarch's eldest son, Yu Zhangping. In terms of seniority, he is your uncle. Yu Changgui reprimanded. Oh, so it's uncle. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, Qianqiu greets uncle. I hope uncle doesn't blame nephew for being rude. However, nephew deeply agrees with uncle's words. There must be someone coveting my family's wealth. Nephew firmly believes that there must be a mole in the Yu family, colluding with those villains outside. Otherwise, my younger brother wouldn't have been captured so easily with a few strong subordinates. Uncle, don't you think so? He seemed to be extremely respectful on the surface, yet anyone could discern the targeted intent in his tone. It was as if Yu Zhangping was the mole, and it caused the expressions of the surrounding people to become extremely strange. Yu Zhangping's face twitched as he sternly said, What do you mean by that? Yu Qianqiu glanced at his father, and saw that he had actually turned his head to the side, as if he didn't hear anything. This further confirmed his guess, and he couldn't help but laugh. Haha. Uncle, don't misunderstand. It's nothing. I just want to tell everyone as the Yu family's eldest son, that since I'm back, anyone who dares to stretch their claws into my family must be prepared to be beheaded. Even if it's the heavenly emperor, haha. I won't let a single one of them go. At the end of his words, the chill in his voice was unmistakable. Yu Zhangping still wanted to say something, but was stopped by his father, the Yu family's patriarch. He only heard him say with a smile, Eldest brother is right. If it's really a family thief, we can't let a single one of them go. Yu Qianqiu smiled and saluted him. Patriarch is indeed worthy of being the patriarch, truly wise. Master. Fu Qing hurriedly walked over and said, There are 3 people outside barging in. They say they are second young master's ticket holders. Hearing this, the members of the Yu clan immediately started whispering to each other. Everyone knew that the so-called owner of the ticket was naturally the kidnapper. To actually dare to barge into the Yu clan in broad daylight, his guts were truly too great. Yu Changgui's expression changed, and he hurriedly walked towards the courtyard. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. His father was anxious to save his son, and had lost his usual calmness. Thereupon the group of people followed him. In the main hall courtyard, 3 burly men saw a group of people coming, but they still stood there with their heads held high. Sure enough, they had the style of kidnappers who wanted money more than their lives. Yu Changgui calmed himself down, walked over and cupped his fists. I am Yu Changgui, may I know which mountain the 3 heroes are from? A rough-looking man on the left cupped his fists and said, Well said. Seeing that Lord Yu is a man who understands the rules, I won't waste any more time. As he spoke, he pointed at the middle-aged man with a gloomy expression and said, "This is our octagonal stronghold's second leader Wang. Today he's here to compete with Elder Yu's faction. Gong against gong, we'll be counting the tickets face to face." The so-called counting tickets was to let the victim confirm whether the kidnapper was his man or not. Then, the kidnapper would confirm whether the victim was sincere in redeeming the ticket. If there was no sincerity, then the hostage might be killed. Yu Qianqiu slightly narrowed his eyes. Octagonal stronghold again. This daddy almost forgot to settle the score with you guys. Today you guys came to remind me. Very good. Second leader Wang. Yu Changgui cupped his fists. The second leader Wang in the middle did not say a word, and only nodded to the man on the right. That man took out a jade pendant from his bosom and handed it to Yu Changgui. When the latter saw the jade pendant, his body swayed, and he almost lost his footing. Obviously, it was his son's possession. The man on the left chuckled and said, "If Lord Yu has verified it, please bring us to see if the 10,000 taels of gold has been prepared." Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted and unhurriedly walked over and said, "A bunch of reckless fools. 10,000 taels of gold, and they still dare to ask for it." As he spoke, he supported his father and walked straight back and said, "Fu Qing, find a chair for master to sit down and rest." The Yu family's group of relatives were somewhat stunned, but since it was none of their business, no one said anything. In the crowd, Yu Zhangping's face flashed with a trace of a sneer. His condescending look immediately angered the two bandits. They immediately reached for the sabers on their waists, wanting to teach Yu Qianqiu a lesson. However, the second leader Wang quickly held them down. When he saw Yu Qianqiu carrying a long sword on his back and a bag on his waist, his pupils fiercely contracted. Fu Qing brought over a chair as instructed. Yu Qianqiu helped his father sit down and said softly, "Father, don't worry for the time being. Leave this matter to me to handle." Yu Changgui grabbed his wrist. Yu Qianqiu lightly pushed him away and shook his head, indicating that he didn't need to worry. He turned back to stare at the three bandits and coldly said, 10,000 taels of gold. What can you do if I don't give it to you?" As soon as these words came out, the Yu family's relatives immediately whispered to each other. Wasn't this forcing the kidnappers to kill the hostages? The two bandits who were about to pull out their sabers immediately pulled out their sabers again. Second leader Wang once again held them down and took a deep breath. He didn't dare to be sure before, but now that he heard the other party say such words, he was almost convinced. Second leader Wang took a few steps forward and bowed to Yu Qianqiu. He said in a respectful tone, "Senior is an expert in the cultivation world. It was our fault for offending Senior today. We also don't dare to ask Senior for the 10,000 taels of gold. We will definitely return the people we kidnapped safely. We won't dare to be careless. Please let us go, Senior." The two bandits were immediately stunned. The usually arrogant second leader would actually say such humble words. They wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. The Yu family's relatives were also dumbfounded. How did the kidnappers suddenly apologize? Among the crowd, Yu Changping had an angry expression. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "I didn't expect you to be so perceptive. You actually know about the cultivation world. I can let you go, but you have to answer a question first. If I am satisfied with your answer, I will let you go. Otherwise, if you make me unhappy, I will definitely raze your Octagon village to the ground." Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The Octagon village was a place that even the government couldn't raze to the ground. Yu Qianqiu's words were too arrogant. However, what did they mean by the cultivation world? Everyone was confused. Yu Changgui, who was sitting on a chair, once again sized up his son's proud back. "Senior, please ask." Second leader Wang bowed respectfully. "Tell me who the Yu family is colluding with. Don't tell me you didn't, or the consequences will be very serious." Yu Qianqiu said lightly. Yu Changping, who was in the crowd, trembled. He looked at his father, the clan leader. This second leader, Wang, had a difficult expression on his face. The rough-looking subordinate behind him walked out, cupped his fists and said casually, "Young Senior, You don't have to make things difficult for our second leader. We can't talk about this. We have our own rules. If we tell you who the client is, then how will our Octagon Village be able to maintain its reputation in the future? How will we be able to continue living in the underworld? Before he could finish his words, they heard the sound of a sword ring. Everyone saw a flash of light in front of them, and then the bandit lost his voice on the spot. His head was tossed high into the air, separated from his shoulders. Warm blood spurted from the severed head, and when the blood ran dry, his body swayed and fell to the ground. That light transformed into a flying sword and circled around Yu Qianqiu a few times before returning to its scabbard. Murder! Everyone cried out in shock. Yu Qianqiu turned around and glanced at them. He said coldly, "If you want to die, then scream as loud as you can." Just this sentence alone caused everyone to fall silent. They had just witnessed the flying sword kill someone. Who would dare to go against his words? A certain father and son were shivering in fear. "Brother!" The remaining two bandits cried out in grief. One of them hugged the dead body while second leader Wang hugged his head. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and shouted angrily, "There are rules in the cultivation world. We are not allowed to meddle in worldly affairs. Why did you kill us mortals?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. "Humph. You seem to know quite a lot. How strange. You kidnapped my younger brother. And now you're trying to reason with me? What kind of logic is that? Forget it. I won't be able to get anything out of you. I believe you have a first leader, right? I'd better go to the Octagon Village myself." As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold glints shot out from the storage pouch. 2 mournful screams rang out, then stopped abruptly. The cold glints disappeared into the red, and the thick smell of blood spread out along with a bloody mist. The Yu clan's relatives and servants had never seen murder like this. Those who were braver had only seen beheadings at the entrance of the food market. They couldn't bear to watch any longer, and turned their heads away to retch. Chapter 143. The cold light receded, and the blood mist gradually dissipated. The 3 bandits had turned into a pool of blood on the ground. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with his hands behind his back, everyone shuddered. This was clearly a murderous demon. The thick smell of blood left a deep mark in everyone's heart. "Fu Qing!" Yu Qianqiu called out. The person who was called let out an "ah" and moved over with trembling legs. His chin trembled as he said, "Eldest young master." Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and frowned. He shouted, "What are you afraid of? How can you guard the door of my Yu clan with this kind of behavior? Stand properly." Yes, eldest young master." Fu Qing tried his best to suppress his trembling body. "Arrange for people to surround this place. Without my permission, none of the Yu clan's relatives are allowed to leave." As he spoke, a sword appeared in Yu Qianqiu's hand, and he handed it to him. He said, "Hold this well. If anyone dares to barge in, kill them with this sword." Seeing him holding the sword in a daze, Yu Qianqiu shouted again, "If anyone dares to barge in, kill them without mercy. If you dare to let even one person go, I will take your head. Do you understand?" Understood. Fu Qing hurriedly nodded his head. All the relatives looked at each other in dismay, but no one dared to object. The patriarch and his sons' faces were ashen. Yu Qianqiu faced his father and bowed. He said, "Father, please wait a moment. I will go to the Octagon Village to bring my brother back. It won't be long before the truth is revealed." Yu Changgui nodded and said, "Go. Come back quickly. Don't let the relatives wait too long." "Yes, father." Yu Qianqiu bowed respectfully. The long sword behind him shot out with a chong sound and carried him away like a ray of light. Instantly, everyone in the courtyard was dumbfounded. That leisurely flying celestial being was fortunately seen by a group of ordinary people. Someone immediately exclaimed, "Heavens! Big Brother is a sword immortal." "Ah, sword immortal!" All the relatives whispered to each other. Yu Changgui was so excited that he was trembling slightly. He had told his son to go and come back quickly, but he didn't expect that he would use such a shocking method. Did he say something wrong? Sigh. Why did he say go and return quickly? One must know that a sword immortal would never show his true appearance in front of mortals. AI. My son is no longer an ordinary person. I was too abrupt. Fu Qing looked at the sword in his hand with a face full of surprise. Today, he was fortunate enough to be bestowed a sword by a sword immortal. This was a blessing that he had cultivated for 8 lifetimes. He held the sword with both hands and walked over to Yu Zhonggui. He asked respectfully, Master, what should this lowly one do? Yu Zhonggui stared at the sword in his hand and couldn't help but reach out to take it. He turned it over and over in his hand and examined it, causing the other clan members to look at it with envy. Yu Zhonggui stood up from his chair and pulled out the sword. The sword was blue like autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp blade glowed with envy. Yu Zhonggui stood up from his chair and pulled out his sword with a schwa sound. The blade of the sword was as clear as autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp edge of the sword was glowing. Good sword. It's really a good sword. All the relatives kept praising it. In fact, they couldn't tell if it was a good sword or not. They mainly thought that it was something from a sword immortal. How could it be bad? In addition, the sword looked so beautiful, so they naturally concluded that it was a good sword. This sword was personally refined by Yu Qianqiu, and there were many more in Utopia. As he could only control 100 flying swords, these were all in stock. However, compared to the treasured swords of the mortal world, this flying sword of the Dharma artifact level was incomparable in terms of workmanship and material. Yu Zhonggui put the sword back into its scabbard and handed it to Fu Qing. This isn't an ordinary sword. It's the eldest young master's flying sword. Since the eldest young master has already given you the authority, just do as he says. You can mobilize all the servants in the residence. Go. The moment he said this, all the servants looked at Fu Qing with envy. Some of the unmarried maids looked at Fu Qing with splendor in their eyes. Yes, Fu Qing retreated. He never thought that a servant guarding the door would have such great authority. This thing was not inferior to an imperial sword. Thinking of the eldest young master's words, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly mobilized people and surrounded all the relatives. Yu Qianqiu still had some impression of the Octagon Village's location. After leaving the Yu residence, it only took him a few moments to find the Octagon Village's hideout in a mountainous area that was 100 miles away. He landed on the sword and immediately caused a commotion in the hideout. Yu Qianqiu sized up the village. It was built on the basis of danger. It was indeed a good place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. It was no wonder that even the authorities couldn't take it down. He squinted his eyes and stared at the signboard at the main entrance of the stronghold. On it were the words Juyi Hall. He snorted in his heart. It seemed like robbers liked to use this gimmick. At this moment, a group of people came out of the hall. All of them were holding shining swords and spears. Needless to say, the burly man in the middle was the leader of the bandit hideout. The man was stunned when he saw Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned when he saw him. The burly man was wearing the same clothes as him. It was the standard clothes of the supporting immortal island. After a closer look, he was astonishingly at the 10th level of the Qi refinement realm. The man excitedly strode over and kowtowed. He said, Luli greets Senior. Senior has come here. But the sect wants. He was so excited that he couldn't continue speaking. The group of bandits behind him were also dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu was stunned again. He immediately understood everything. So this guy was also an unlucky person who was chased out of the supporting immortal island. No wonder the second leader knew a little about the cultivation world. Looking at this guy's expression, he probably thought that the supporting immortal island wanted to call him back. Wishful thinking. I was wondering who was causing trouble here. So it was the abandoned disciple of the supporting immortal island. You actually dared to wear the clothes of the supporting immortal island. You really don't want to live. Yu Qianqiu snorted. The man kowtowed again. Senior, please forgive me. After I left the supporting immortal island, I really didn't know how to survive. I could only bring a group of people to become bandits. Yu Qianqiu thought about it. A disciple who wasn't even at the foundation establishment stage couldn't even be compared to a martial arts expert. Moreover, Most of them had lost contact with the outside world since they were young. They knew nothing about survival. Ling Feng and the others were also at a loss when they were just chased out. Like Guan Yu, he ended up pretending to be a Taoist in a Taoist temple to swindle people. Thinking about this, his anger dissipated a lot. He said in a deep voice, "You are Luli, right? Get up. I'm not here to catch up with you. Where is the kidnapped kid in the U residence?" Luli quickly got up and pointed to the horse pen. "That kid is locked up there. You didn't do anything to him, right?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at him coldly. No, not even a strand of hair is missing." Luli wasn't an idiot. He could tell that this kid was related to the people from the supporting Immortal Island. In his heart, he cursed the employer's ancestors. But he didn't know that he was also cursing Yu Qianqiu's ancestors. Yu Qianqiu slowly walked into the horse pen. Instantly, a rage burned in his chest. A kid whose face could be vaguely seen was about 8 or 9 years old. He was glaring at the people who came in. His body was covered with grass and horse dung. He was tied up tightly, and his mouth was stuffed with a dirty cloth. His cheeks were swollen, and there was a clear palm print. It was obvious that he had been slapped. This was his younger brother Yu Wuqiu? Hee. This is what you meant by not even a strand of hair is missing. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Luli with a cold smile. He originally wanted to take him in for his own use. But now he was sentenced to death on the spot. The latter was so scared that his head was full of sweat. He stuttered and didn't know what to say. Yu Qianqiu walked to the kid's side and pulled out the rag in his mouth. A trail of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Who knew that the kid would spit out a mouthful of bloody saliva the moment he loosened his mouth? He opened his mouth and cursed. "Evil thieves, kill me if you have the guts. Otherwise, I will trample your den to the ground in the future." Yu Qianqiu, who was spat on his face, was stunned. Then he smiled bitterly and wiped his face. This brat spoke without rhyme or reason. He didn't know how to beat around the bush. If he was really a bandit, seeing him like this, I'm afraid he would really eliminate the root of the problem to prevent future troubles. He immediately flicked his finger on the kid's forehead and scolded jokingly. "Brat, what are you spitting for? I'm Yu Qianqiu." "Bastard, how dare you flick my forehead? You're Yu Qianqiu, right? Okay, I'll remember you. You're Yu Qianqiu? Why is your name the same as my big brother's?" The kid's tattered face was crooked. "Nonsense, I'm your big brother. Father sent me to save you," Yu Qianqiu said unhappily. Chapter 144. There's no proof. The kid showed a suspicious expression. "What proof do you have to prove that you are my brother? Bastard, you're so smart. If you were smart, how could you be tied up here?" Yu Qianqiu flicked him again, causing him to cry out in pain. He casually broke the ropes binding him, got up, stared at Luli and asked, "This was caused by Yu Zhongping's family and you, right? How did you know? Could it be that the second in command who went down the mountain told you?" Luli was shocked. Only he and the second head knew about this. He didn't tell anyone else. It was the second head who told him. It wasn't a good thing to betray one's employer. Yu Qianqiu sneered. With Yu Zhongping's character, he shows everything on his face. Do you need someone to tell you? As for your second head, I saw that he wasn't feeling well, so I sent him to reincarnate. It's him. Suddenly, the kid pointed at his swollen face and said, "It was Yu Zhongping, that bastard. He tricked us out of the city. My face is swollen because of him." "Ah, you killed the second head. Then there are 2 other brothers?" Luli was shocked. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the child and didn't say anything. He turned back to size up Luli and asked curiously, "I say, Luli, have you been away from supporting Immortal Island for too long? Or have water entered your brain? Do I need to report to you when I kill people? Stop talking nonsense with me. If it wasn't for the fact that we were from the same sect, your head would have been removed. Go and gather all your minions. I have something to say." Luli seemed to be drained of all his strength. He said dejectedly, "Yes," and walked out slowly. Maybe because he was tied up for too long, Yu Wuqiu's limbs were a little stiff. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. "Can you still walk? Do you want me to carry you?" Yu Wuqiu was embarrassed into anger. "Who wants you to carry me? I can walk by myself. He suddenly asked curiously, Are you really my brother? He kept looking at the stranger in front of him. Follow me if you can. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He thought to himself, You're just a little kid, yet you're already so arrogant. This is the problem of spoiling the children of big families. If this goes on, you'll be at a disadvantage. Today, I'll teach this cheap little brother a lesson, lest he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Dang dang dang. The urgent sound of a gong rang outside, and the entire stronghold became lively. Luli stood on a small wooden platform and looked at the hundreds of subordinates that had gathered. His face was ashen, and he did not make a sound, as if he had a premonition that something bad was about to happen. However, Yu Qianqiu's strength was not something he could fight against. To put it bluntly, killing him was as easy as killing an ant. A group of subordinates stood in an orderly manner below the platform. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. They were quite disciplined. He looked back at the little kid who was limping behind him and said, Follow me. Luli took the lead and walked to the side of the wooden platform. The little kid struggled to climb up, but before he could stand firm, Yu Qianqiu grabbed the back of his collar and lifted him up. Let go of me, I can walk. The little kid's struggle was futile. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the group of people below and said, Originally, I wanted to let them go today, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish today. As soon as he finished speaking, Luli knelt down and begged, Senior, please let them go. They have parents and children at the foot of the mountain. Their families depend on them to earn money. If they weren't forced to, they wouldn't have followed me up the mountain to become bandits. Once they're killed, their families won't be able to survive. Senior, please have mercy. The subordinates all looked terrified. They had all seen Yu Qianqiu descend from the sky. To them, those who could fly in the sky were like gods. Now that this god said he wanted to kill them, they immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. In an instant, the entire mountain camp was filled with begging voices. What do you mean by taking care of the elderly and children? After you die, tell those words to the people you killed. Since you've come out to make a living, you must understand that sooner or later, you'll have to pay for what you did. It's not that I won't pay, it's that the time isn't right. Yu Qianqiu slowly said in a cold voice. No. Senior, I beg you, no. Luli hugged his leg and begged. Scram! Yu Qianqiu directly kicked him off the platform. Then, he shook the little kid and shouted, Watch carefully. In fact, Yu Wuqiu was already a little stunned. He had never seen so many people kneeling and begging. As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold lights shot out from the storage bag, crazily sweeping towards the people kneeling on the ground. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, and screams shook the sky. The little kid was stunned at first. When he came to his senses, his whole body trembled. He covered his eyes with his little hands, unable to watch anymore. Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. Today, he was going to kill this person for you to see. You have no choice but to watch. His thumb and index finger pinched the back of the little kid's neck, and a stream of true essence entered his body. The little kid's hands immediately drooped down, and his eyes were wide open. Witnessing the bloody, violent, and wanton killing in front of him, he could not speak, nor could he close his eyes. He could not move and could only watch and listen. Crystal clear tears continuously flowed down his cheeks. Below the platform, Luli clenched his fists and knelt there with tears streaming down his face. He looked up to the sky and howled. But none of those wantonly killing flying swords touched him. Those who wanted to escape were immediately shredded into pieces by a few cold lights. There were also those who wanted to fight it out with Yu Qianqiu before they died. Unfortunately, they did not even have the chance to get close. Their legs were nowhere to be seen, and when they fell, they were already shredded into pieces. In just a short while, apart from Luli, not a single living person could be seen below. Broken limbs were everywhere, and the blood on the ground gathered into streams that flowed towards the lower ground. The smell of blood in the air was suffocating. After killing those who needed to be killed, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense moved, and 100 cold lights swept towards the various buildings in the village with an unstoppable momentum. Crashing sounds could be heard everywhere. Not long after, smoke and dust rose everywhere. Even the erected flagpole was not spared. The cold lights retracted, and the sounds disappeared. The surroundings finally quieted down, and only Lu Li's sobbing could be heard below the platform. The entire Octagon village was no longer recognizable. Only the wooden platform under Yu Qianqiu's feet remained the same, standing there alone. Yu Qianqiu turned the little lad's head around and let him look around. He said, "Didn't you want to flatten this place? I've already done it for you, but what's wrong with you? Why don't you even dare to look? If you don't even dare to look, what gives you the right to say that you want to flatten this place?" Yu Qianqiu lifted him up and faced him, shouting, "Crying? Why are you crying? You only have this little guts, and this little bit of guts. Are you even worthy of saying such things?" As he spoke, he turned him around again, letting him witness the tragic scene around him. He spun around and shouted, "Do you see that? Originally, I did not intend to kill them, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. All right, it's flattened now. Why are you crying? Are you regretting it? Then why did you open your mouth and speak such nonsense? Let me tell you now, as a man, you must be responsible for every word you say. Everything in front of you is the result of your careless words. Look carefully at everything here." After a while, when he was almost done lecturing Lu Li, Yu Qianqiu bent over and picked up Lu Li. Then, he carried the two of them and flew away on his sword. Just as he stood up, the wooden platform collapsed. The entire Octagon village was completely flattened. Chapter 145. Inside the Yu clan's courtyard, Yu Qianqiu descended from the sky with two people in his hands, his long sword returning to its scabbard. Everyone was shocked when they saw Yu Wuqiu's appearance. They didn't expect the Yu clan's young master, who usually lived a luxurious life, to end up like this, especially with the two palm prints on his face. When the patriarch and his son saw the people brought by Yu Qianqiu, their faces turned deathly pale. Yu Changgui waved his hand to disperse the crowd, then hurriedly walked up to his son, who had a lifeless expression on his face, and asked anxiously, "Wuqiu, what happened to you?" "Father, he's fine. He was just a little frightened," Yu Qianqiu said calmly. At this moment, Yu Wuqiu was awoken by his father's familiar face. When he came back to his senses, he saw that Yu Qianqiu was like he had seen a ghost. He hurriedly hid behind Yu Changgui, hugged his arm, and pointed at Yu Qianqiu, screaming, "Father, he killed people. He really killed people. He killed so many people. So many people died." Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu at the same time, but they clearly weren't surprised that he had killed people. Yu Changgui looked at his eldest son puzzled and asked, "What happened?" "It's nothing. It's just a few hundred small fries from the Octagon camp. I casually took care of them. In the future, there won't be any more Octagon camp bandits in this area," Yu Qianqiu said with a calm smile. He said it lightly, but everyone's hair stood on end. A few hundred people were all killed by him in less than 4 hours? The more they thought about it, the colder they felt. When did the Yu clan have such a killer? You killed them all? Yu Changgui frowned. Obviously, he was a little unhappy with his son's massacre. "I didn't kill them all. I left one alive." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and pointed at the man lying on the ground. He sneered and said, "This is the Octagon Stronghold's big leader, Lu Li. He has a close relationship with our patriarch and his son. I've already asked him, and he's already explained everything. This time, the kidnapping of my younger brother was the doing of the sanctimonious patriarch of our Yu clan, father and son. Their goal was to steal our clan's wealth. They were going to kill the hostages as soon as they got the gold, and then think of a way to get rid of my father, so that there would be no successor for our family, and then find a reason to swallow our property." The two handprints on his younger brother's face were personally slapped by Yu Zhangping after he tricked him out of the city. "It's just that they never expected me to come back at this time." The Yu clan's relatives immediately went into an uproar. They instantly distanced themselves from the father and son. It would be best if they didn't get hurt by this killer, Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. Just by looking at the father and son's expression, he knew that this wasn't something that his son could do alone. This daddy doesn't have time to be long-winded with you. I'll first make up a crime for you. In any case, it's just that. If I didn't care about this old man's face, I would have killed you long ago. Yu Changgui's complexion turned ashen. He fiercely turned his head and glared at the father and son. He shouted, "Unsatisfied beasts, what else do you two dogs have to say?" When the patriarch and his son saw Yu Qianqiu bring Luli and Yu Wuqiu here, they knew that everything was over. They originally wanted to quibble, but when they saw the gloomy expression in Yu Qianqiu's eyes, they couldn't say anything. In the face of such a powerful opponent, any kind of explanation was unnecessary. Suddenly, Yu Changping rushed out of the crowd and knelt in front of Yu Changgui's feet. He repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Big brother, I was blinded by greed. Big brother, for the sake of being from the same clan, please spare me this time." As he spoke, he slapped his own mouth. Yu Changgui kicked him away and sternly shouted, "Bastard, I don't have a brother like you. Come, tie up this father and son pair, and send them to the government office together with this bandit." Several able-bodied men immediately took ropes and tied up the three men tightly, and then they were pushed out of the room. The Yu clan's relatives shook their heads and sighed. They didn't expect this sanctimonious father and son pair to have such wild ambitions. How many people didn't covet this family's wealth? Wait, Yu Changgui suddenly sighed and said, "Forget it, family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Just send them to the ancestral hall and deal with them according to the clan's rules." Then he cupped his hands towards the other clan members and said, "I hope that when we carry out the clan's rules, the clan members can be witnesses." That's right. Family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Of course. Don't worry, big brother. We all saw it with our own eyes, so we must be witnesses. Everyone agreed. Yu Changgui was the clan's biggest financial backer. If they didn't do him a favor, then when would they do him a favor? In any case, they wouldn't lose anything. At this time, Yu Qianqiu suddenly stood up with a smile and bowed to everyone, saying, "Junior also has a matter to ask of all the uncles and brothers. Junior came back this time because of my father's summons. Since this matter is over, Junior still needs to go out and cultivate. As for this matter, I hope that all the uncles and brothers can keep it a secret for Junior. Just pretend that Junior never appeared in this matter, please." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone immediately agreed, but the atmosphere from before was gone. Although they were all clan members, the crux of the matter was that this fellow was too ruthless. Killing people was like cutting vegetables, and he didn't even blink. Who knew what the consequences would be if they said the wrong thing? But from his words, everyone thought of one thing. It turned out that there was such a powerful son hiding behind Yu Changgui, and he could summon him at any time. But he had never said anything about it. How sinister. Fortunately, they hadn't offended him too much. Otherwise, if something happened, it would be a massacre. Who could resist that? Everyone shuddered at the thought of it. Yu Qianqiu smiled and thanked them. This was the effect he wanted. It wasn't easy for him to come back, so he had no choice but to use such a ruthless method. Since they had met, he had to get rid of them completely. In the future, he wouldn't place his thoughts here. A group of clan members and servants escorted the three people out of the Yu residence. The surroundings instantly became much quieter. Yu Wuqiu hid behind his father, craning his neck to secretly size up this elder brother of his. This elder brother was really a little too scary. Yu Qianqiu smiled at him. He had thought that Yu Wuqiu had been frightened, and he had to adjust his emotions a little to prevent it from leaving a shadow in his heart. Now it seemed that this brat was born with courage, and there was no need to worry. What you said just now was all true. Yu Changgui looked at him and frowned. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and he asked in surprise, "What was true? You said that you still had to go out to cultivate. Didn't you come back with success this time?" Yu Changgui asked. Yu Wuqiu, who was behind him, suddenly shook him and asked, "Father, is he really my elder brother Yu Qianqiu?" Yu Changgui lowered his head and shouted, "Bastard! If he isn't your elder brother, who else could he be?" Yu Wuqiu pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said embarrassedly, "But he killed a lot of people. Father, he really killed a lot of people. Hundreds of people were all killed by him." "Ignorant!" Yu Changgui shouted. If your elder brother didn't want to save you, would he have killed so many people? When he remembered that the Octagon village had kidnapped both of his sons, he felt a wave of disgust in his heart. He thought that it was good to kill them. If they didn't kill them, who knew when they would kidnap his grandson again? Yu Qianqiu smiled and suddenly reached out to Fu Qing, who was standing not far away. The sword that Fu Qing was holding flew into his hand, causing the latter to panic. Yu Qianqiu handed the sword to his brother and said with a smile, "Take it." Chapter 146. When Yu Wuqiu saw that the sword could fly by itself, his eyes were already full of stars. When he saw his big brother telling him to hold it, he greedily looked at it and looked up at his father. Seeing his father nod his head, he shyly reached out to take it and held it tightly in his arms. He looked at his big brother and finally had a good impression of him. He still had the mind of a child. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "Wuqiu, can you write now?" Yu Wuqiu nodded his head and said, "I could write when I was 4. Not bad." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and shouted to Fucking, "Bring a short table over and prepare a brush, ink and paper." Fucking hurriedly went to prepare. Yu Changgui looked at his 2 sons and didn't know what they were going to do. After a while all the tools were set up. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the table and smiled at his brother. "Wuqiu, big brother has something to say to you. I will speak and you write. Write down everything I say. I want to test if you can really write." Hearing him say this, Yu Wuqiu's childish eagerness to win was aroused. He walked over and put the sword on the table. He grabbed the writing brush and dipped it in the ink. He stared at his brother with big eyes, waiting for him to speak. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and walked over to his side and said with a smile, "I am the eldest son of the family. I should be filial to my parents and share my father's worries. But I am young and frivolous. I want to pursue the great way, but the great way is vague. This road is full of ups and downs, but I must pursue it. I dare not be distracted, and I am ashamed to face my parents. Today, I will take up the brush and entrust a heavy task to me." At this point, Yu Wuqiu knew what he meant and looked back at his big brother in shock. Yu Changgui's eyebrows knitted together. Yu Qianqiu pursed his lips and signaled his brother to continue writing. He sighed and said, "From today onwards, big brother's heavy responsibility will be entrusted to me. Brother must remember that when we were in the bandits' lair, big brother used the blood of hundreds of bandits to teach you. You must know that only by enduring the hardships of hardships can one rise above others. One must not indulge in riches and honor. One must guard against arrogance and rashness. One must be filial to one's parents. One must inherit the family business, and one must carry forward the family's name. Brother, I hope you will remember this great trust." After he finished speaking, he also finished writing. Although his handwriting wasn't very good, the meaning of the words was simple and clear. Yu Wuqiu was still a little confused about the great Tao in front of him. He only knew that his brother was going out to do something big, and everything in the family was going to be entrusted to him. Looking at the words on the paper, he pouted for a long time before reluctantly saying, "I will remember big brother's words." "Ha! It's good that you've remembered it. Keep what you've written well. If I come back one day and find that you failed to do it, you're still acting like a thief in a den of thieves. You don't have any real ability, but you're still spouting nonsense. Just wait and see how I'll deal with you then." Yu Qianqiu laughed. Yu Wuqiu pouted higher and higher. Yu Changgui, on the other hand, was distressed. Originally, when he saw that his eldest son had returned, he thought that someone was going to inherit the family business. The tradition of the Huaxia Empire was that the eldest son would inherit the family business. Now that the eldest son had borrowed his second son's pen to express his intentions clearly, it was equivalent to indirectly answering the previous question. The path that he had walked on must be incomparably difficult, and he was afraid that it would be difficult to turn back. That's why he did this. He had put in a lot of effort. Yu Changgui couldn't say anything more. Now that his son's real situation was in front of him, he was no longer an ordinary person and couldn't force him to stay. He could only regret why he agreed to his son's request back then. He sighed and said, Fu Qing, put up the second young master's calligraphy and hang it in his room. Yes. Fu Qing respectfully accepted the order. Speaking of which, Fu Qing was really happy today. Master and young master would always look for him whenever something happened. His future was probably going to change. When are we leaving? Yu Changgui sighed. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He originally wanted to leave right away, but thinking that it was too much. He hadn't returned for almost 10 years. What's the matter if he delayed for a day? He smiled and replied, Then let's stay one more night. Yu Changgui understood the meaning behind his words. He waved his hand and called for the servants to prepare a banquet. The father and son trio walked toward Shui Ernyang. Yu Wuqiu hugged the sword happily. Just as he reached the door, he saw Shui Ernyang coming out. When the latter saw her youngest son, she immediately hugged him and burst into tears. Yu Qianqiu had a toothache when he heard this. They hadn't seen each other for almost 10 years, but his mother still loved to cry. Both he and his father turned their heads to the side. Ah, how did my son become like this? Ah, who slapped him on his face? Shui Ernyang asked anxiously. Yu Changgui's face twitched. He turned his head and said, I say, are you done yet? Such a small injury will be fine in 2 days. Can't you see boss is here? Why are you crying all the time? Ah, Shui Ernyang stood up. When she saw Yu Qianqiu, she threw herself at him and cried. Where did my son go for so many years? Don't tell me you don't even want your mother anymore. Woo-woo. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and pushed her away. He smiled bitterly. Mother, your son hasn't eaten for a long time. My stomach is really hungry. Ah, then why didn't you say so earlier? Shui Ernyang wiped away her tears and said, You wait, I will personally get it for you. She then led the servant girl away. Phew. The father and son let out a breath and looked at each other. Xiao Wuqiu shook his head and sighed. I really can't stand mother like this. I would rather stay in the thieves' den for a few more days. Bastard, what did you say? Yu Changgui shouted. The little fellow stuck out his tongue and quickly changed the topic. Big brother, I am too dirty. I will go take a bath first. Otherwise, I won't be able to attend the banquet later. He then ran away. Soon, the family of 4 sat at the sumptuous dinner table. With his mother's persuasion, Yu Qianqiu ate until he was full. Although it was a little uncomfortable, he enjoyed the warm feeling. That night, in Yu Changgui's study room, the father and son had a deep conversation. Yu Qianqiu gave them 3 sealed porcelain bottles as an explanation. After that, Yu Qianqiu asked someone to invite his mother over. In front of the 2 elders, he took out 2 ruby elixirs that were shining with rainbow light and handed them to them. The couple looked at the beads in their hands with their mouths agape. After a long time, Yu Changgui was moved and said, Is this an immortal elixir? Yu Qianqiu smiled indifferently and said, More or less. Father, mother, just take it. This elixir has the effect of preserving one's appearance for a long time. It can also detoxify and nourish one's appearance. After taking it, one will be immune to all kinds of poison. However, there are some side effects after taking it. You have to be prepared beside the toilet bowl and bathtub. Hearing the benefits, the couple directly filtered out the side effects. Yu Changgui solemnly swallowed the rainbow light into his mouth. However, he was not used to this quail egg-sized thing, so it took a lot of effort to swallow it down his throat. Shui Ernyang was about to swallow it, but she stopped and said, I think I don't need it. Leave it for your brother. Have you used it before, my son? Yu Qianqiu sighed in his heart. All mothers in the world were great. He smiled and said, My brother is still young. Do you want him to stay like this for the rest of his life? I will take care of his matters. Mother, you don't have to worry too much. As for the elixir, I have already used it. You can take it with ease. Only then did Shui Ernyang feel at ease and swallow it. After coming out, he did not sleep in his original room that night. Instead, he slept with his brother. He told the boy many things, but he did not know if he could remember them. The next morning, the family could no longer find him. Only then did they realize that Yu Qianqiu had left quietly. Yu Changgui stood in the garden with his son, who was holding a sword. The former let out a long sigh. Chapter 147. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to spend the night peacefully before leaving. After lying in bed with his brother and chatting for a while, the little fellow fell asleep in a daze, perhaps because he was too tired. Looking at the sleeping little fellow, Yu Qianqiu felt emotional. He considered if he should help the little fellow to a position that ordinary people couldn't reach. After some thought, he gave up. This family didn't have many people to begin with, and he was leaving. Furthermore, no one knew what the future held for them. Sometimes, there were some things that he wasn't confident in. If he wasn't careful, he might bring disaster to the family. It was best to let the family live peacefully. He tried his best not to let them get involved in those illusory matters. He could do whatever he wanted alone. Having a family to feed them would only be a burden to both of them. It was too dangerous. Unable to sleep late at night, Yu Qianqiu decided to leave when he thought of how his mother would definitely be crying when they parted the next day. Although he said that he was leaving, he had actually returned to Utopia in an instant. Now any place was extremely close to him, but it was also extremely far away. It was also late at night in Utopia. However, Ethereal Palace on Ethereal Peak was like a starry sky. It was extremely charming under the embellishment of fluorite. The messy names of Ethereal Peak and Ethereal Palace were all given by Yu Qianqiu. The main reason was that he couldn't think of any good names, so he used them as if he had heard them somewhere before. As soon as Yu Qianqiu appeared in Misty Palace, he heard a familiar horn sound from afar. He turned his head to look and murmured, "Emergency assembly signal. Is Yunchang training for night raids again? Let's take a look." There was a field in the middle of a row of wooden and stone houses that took up an area of nearly 1,000 meters. At that moment, the field was surrounded by flames. A group of people rushed out of the houses and lined up neatly in 3 groups. Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared on top of a building to observe. The people in front of him were the original 400 disciples from the various sections. After eliminating the female disciples, there were 309 people left. Thus, under Yu Qianqiu's suggestion, Guan Yu divided them into 3 companies. Each company had 103 people, with a company commander. Each company was further divided into 3 platoons, each platoon consisting of 34 people. Each platoon had a platoon leader. Each platoon was divided into 3 classes, and each class had 11 people. Each class had a squad leader. The 3 company commanders were 3 late nascent soul cultivators, and the platoon leaders and squad leaders were also nascent soul cultivators. At the same cultivation level, these positions were usually taken by cultivators who were good at commanding. Guan Yu immediately discovered that the efficiency of training had greatly increased after the division management. In front of the field, a large black triangular flag was hung on a flagpole. If one were to look at it carefully under the light of the flames, they could vaguely see 2 large golden characters embroidered on it. Hero. Next to the flagpole, on a stone platform, Guan Yu was dressed in black, with a black scarf wrapped around his head. He swept his cold gaze across the field with an extraordinary bearing, nodding his head in satisfaction. Suddenly, he shouted in a deep voice, "Company commander, come up to the stage to receive the battle plan." He then took out 3 jade archives. The 3 men standing in front of the 3 teams rushed up to the stone platform. They each received a jade archive from Guan Yu and immediately scanned it with their divine sense. Once they were done, they returned the jade archives and dashed to the front of their respective teams. The 3 of them shouted to the members of their respective teams, "Dress according to the requirements of Battle Plan Number 3. Carry the appropriate weapons. You are required to assemble within 5 minutes. Dismissed." Whoosh! In an instant, all 3 teams rushed back to their rooms. Not long after, one by one, they rushed out dressed in black, with black scarves wrapped around their heads. After they were in position, the company commanders gathered their platoon commanders and squad leaders and quickly passed down the battle plan. Finally, one by one, the company commanders reported to Guan Yu. "Reporting. First company is ready. Reporting. Second company is ready. Reporting. Third company is ready." Guan Yu nodded and shouted, "Order." Once the target has entered the encirclement, The first round of attack will be concentrated by all three companies. We must inflict the greatest amount of damage to the target. Once we achieve the desired effect, immediately move on to the second round of attack. First company and third company will be the main attackers, while second company will support them. Also, seize the spoils of war as fast as possible, considering that the target may have a large number of reinforcements. Once this situation is discovered, third company will immediately switch from the main attack to a defensive position. If the defensive position is not ideal, first company and second company will quickly return to support. Gather the greatest fighting strength possible and retreat quickly. If the situation becomes extremely dire, first company and second company will retreat, while third company will cover the rear. Understood? Understood. The shouts shook the heavens. With a wave of Guan Yu's hand, the company commanders turned around and shouted, "Move out!" With the order, over 300 people pulled the black scarves from their necks to their noses, revealing only their eyes. They quickly flew into the sky, with Guan Yu following closely behind. In an instant, the entire field became quiet, with only the flickering of fire. Standing on the roof, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. Not bad. From the time of the emergency assembly to the time of departure, it took less than 10 minutes. Sigh. But their weapons are different, and their cultivation methods are also different. I wonder if they can unleash the greatest power in a group battle. Looks like I'll have to find an opportunity to drag them out and test it out. Currently, Yu Qianqiu was the only one living in the small courtyard, and it was very quiet. Yang Qian was also very perceptive. When he saw that the direct disciple of the Alchemy Pavilion's managing elder and the daughter of the 10,000 Fragrance Gardens managing elder were together, he no longer assigned anyone to this courtyard. After the death of the Alchemy Pavilion's external deacon, Yin Shu, Guan Weiwu had not found anyone to replace him. For the time being, the internal deacon, Yang Qian, was in charge of all these miscellaneous matters. He had practically become the Alchemy Pavilion's chief steward, and had a lot of power. Yu Qianqiu leisurely walked towards the main hall of the Alchemy Pavilion. Many disciples would call him Martial Uncle when they saw him, and those of the same generation would greet each other. Those of a higher generation would also nod at him. As for the fact that his cultivation had already reached the core formation stage, he did not tell anyone on Fuxian Island. All in all, these days were quite comfortable. Thinking back to what Gu Qingyan had said when he saw his carefree life, he said, "You're the best. For someone of my cultivation, in a place like the Cultivation Pavilion, where experts are as common as clouds, it would be tiring to just greet and greet. It would be best for me to obediently hide and cultivate and not come out. Do you know where Deacon Yang is?" Yu Qianqiu pulled a disciple over and asked. He had come to find Yang Qian. After the disciple greeted him, he told him that Yang Qian was in the main hall. When he walked into the main hall, he saw Yang Qian looking around. "Deacon Yang!" Yu Qianqiu shouted. Yang Qian turned around and saw that it was him. He shook his head and said with a smile, "It's really difficult to see you even once. Tell me, why did you take the initiative to find me this time? Look at what you're saying. Aren't you too busy right now? I don't want to disturb you so often." Yu Qianqiu joked. The two of them had always had a good relationship, and would often joke around like this when they met. "I still have things to do. If you have something to say, just say it," Yang Qian said bluntly. Yu Qianqiu nodded and asked, "I heard that all the sects are going to send more people to the Cultivation Alliance. Is this true?" "You still don't know if it's true or not. Didn't the person in Wanfen Garden tell you?" Yang Qian smiled meaningfully. "I only heard about this. I don't know the specifics. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to disturb you." "Oh," Yang Qian smiled noncommittally. He paused and said, "It's true. The cause is the matter between Ong Kwangsung and the Demon Blood Palace. Both sides have stopped fighting, but this time, many sects were involved. Regarding Ong Kwangsung always stirring up trouble, all the righteous sects in the cultivation world are very angry. Therefore, they decided to strengthen the Cultivation Alliance in name only. It will truly play a role of fair adjudication. Those sects that cause trouble will be punished together. Right now, all the sects are discussing the specifics. I reckon that in a few days, they will send people to put it into action. Yu Qianqiu nodded in thought. So it was like this. He understood. Yang Qian looked at him and said strangely, "Why do you ask? Do you want to go? I advise you not to think about it. This kind of thing is usually led by the people of the cultivation pavilion. It has nothing to do with the people of the other sections." Chapter 148. What kind of logic is this? Yu Qianqiu frowned. Everyone is a disciple of Fuxian Island. Why is the cultivation pavilion in charge of this matter? Isn't the sect being a little too biased by doing this? His voice grew louder as he spoke. He wasn't excited, but he really wanted this chance to leave the island. With the name of Fuxian Island, Ong Kwangsung believed that everything would go smoothly. So what if the other party recognized that this Yu Qianqiu was that Yu Qianqiu? As long as he could see Chu Ping, or fulfill his promise, he would just deny it. He didn't believe that Ong Kwangsung would dare to detain a disciple of Fuxian Island. Even if he took a step back, could they detain him? As for what kind of trouble he would cause, that was a matter for the future. He had been away from Chu Ping for too long. On the surface, he looked like he was living comfortably, but who knew that there was a thorn in his throat? He couldn't eat or sleep well. He wanted to go according to his plan, but the time was too torturous. Who knew how long he would have to wait? Lower your voice. How dare you speak so carelessly? Yang Qian dragged him to a remote place outside the hall. He was slightly annoyed. Who said that the sect is biased? The disciples that are sent out represent the face of supporting Immortal Island. They might encounter unexpected situations at any time. That's why the cultivation pavilion has to choose the most elite disciples of the same cultivation level. How can you say that the sect is biased? Don't the other branches have elite disciples? Why do we have to choose from the cultivation pavilion? Yu Qianqiu was a little restless, so his words were a little direct. Yang Qian was indeed a little angry. A foundation establishment disciple actually dared to speak to him in such a tone. Then, he thought of the two principal elders standing behind him, and calmed himself down. Then he said earnestly, "You've been on supporting Immortal Island for a long time. You have to know your priorities. What is the master?" The cultivation pavilion was the foundation of the entire supporting Immortal Island. Every generation's sect master was a principal elder of the cultivation pavilion, so the cultivation pavilion was the master. The existence of the other branches is to cooperate with the cultivation pavilion. This is the first time. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu's face was still dark, he explained again. This trip to the Cultivation Alliance isn't like usual. We'll have to work with other sects for a long time. To put it bluntly, the people who go out are related to the reputation of Fuxian Island, the #1 sect in the world. Those who can go are the elite disciples of various cultivation periods. The sect has already decided that in addition to appointing a pavilion of cultivation elder as the person in charge, 3 days from now, there will be a selection competition at the Pavilion of Cultivation to select 5 nascent soul disciples and 10 core formation disciples. Foundation establishment disciples will not be included. His last sentence was undoubtedly telling Yu Qianqiu, "You're still in the foundation establishment stage, don't count on it." Yu Qianqiu furrowed his brows and asked, "What kind of screening method? Did the sect stipulate that only disciples of the Pavilion of Cultivation can participate?" "No, as long as you're in the nascent soul or core formation stage, you can participate. The nascent soul disciples will be in the top 5, and the core formation disciples will be in the top 10. However, according to convention, the other branches won't participate. In fact, they don't have to participate. You can imagine the result. On one side are disciples who have no time to cultivate, and on the other side are disciples who put all their energy into cultivation. Among the disciples of the same level, how many can be a match for the Pavilion of Cultivation?" Yu Qianqiu happily said, "Deacon Yang, if I want to participate, where do I go to sign up?" Seeing that this guy still didn't give up, Yang Qian said with a slightly unhappy expression, "What? Did you just ignore what I just said? Didn't you hear me say that foundation establishment disciples can't participate? Who said I'm a foundation establishment disciple? Said Yu Qianqiu with a smile. He stretched out a palm, and a plume of smoke rose up from his palm. In an instant, 3 Bingdi lotuses were condensed, swaying in the wind in a lifelike manner. 2 of the lotuses were in full bloom. The other one was still a bud, and hadn't bloomed yet. But it clearly told the other party that his cultivation had reached the early stage of core formation. Early stage of core formation. Yang Qian was dumbstruck. If he remembered correctly, when Yu Qianqiu first came to Fuxian Island, he was only at the 10th level of qi refining. It had only been 6 or 7 years, but he had already reached the early stage of core formation. How was this possible? But the truth was right in front of him. Without this cultivation, it was impossible to release one's vitality and form 3 vivid twin lotuses. Yang Qian's throat trembled. He himself had spent more than 50 years to reach the early stage of core formation, which was not bad. After a long time he said, "Core formation disciples can go to Penglai Pavilion's utility hall to register for the competition." Suddenly, he remembered something and changed the topic. "Wait for me here, don't leave yet." With that he ran away. Yu Qianqiu was startled, and didn't know what he was going to do. After waiting for a while, he saw Yang Qian and Guan Weiwu rushing over. He groaned in his heart. Damn it. Looks like I have to bleed a little this time. Otherwise I won't be able to fool them. Guan Weiwu walked up to him, and asked with a serious expression, "Are you really at the early stage of core formation? What is going on? You should know that this is not a small matter." Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. I have something to say to you in private. I also want to go to your pill room to show you something." "You want to go to my pill room?" Guan Weiwu's eyes flashed as he looked at his favorite disciple and said, "Follow me." Yu Qianqiu obediently followed his master to the elder's pill room under the alchemy pavilion. Yang Qian knew that the master and disciple had something private to talk about, so he didn't follow. Guan Weiwu turned around and said, "There's only the 2 of us here. If you have something to say it." Yu Qianqiu embarrassedly said, "I deserve to die. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. In fact, I have long since developed a better method to make the vitality pill. However, I was blinded by greed and secretly made a lot of it for myself. That's why I was able to forcefully raise my cultivation to the core formation stage in a few years." His voice became softer and softer, as if he had made a huge mistake. "What?" Guan Weiwu cried out in surprise. "Is what you said true?" Then his face was full of surprise. He eagerly rubbed his palms and regretfully said, "Why didn't you say so earlier? AI, why didn't you say so earlier? Damn it. If it wasn't for this competition, and the fact that the 10,000 fragrance garden has a limited supply of spirit herbs, I wouldn't have said it even if I was beaten to death." Yu Qianqiu muttered in his heart and explained, "Actually, I wanted to tell Master long ago, but I made a mistake first, so I didn't dare to say it. This time, I heard that there is a competition at the cultivation pavilion, but no one from my alchemy pavilion is participating. This disciple can't take this lying down, and wants to compete with the disciples of the cultivation pavilion. That's why I said this. I hope Master can see this disciple's sincerity, and help this disciple out of this predicament. This disciple promises not to do this again. Let's not talk about this for now. There are spirit herbs for refining the vitality pill. First, refine a furnace for me to see." Guan Weiwu pointed to a pile of spirit herbs to the side with an anxious expression. Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "The Pavilion of Cultivation's competition requires those who are at least core formation to participate. Because of this, I revealed my cultivation level. I thought about how I would refine pills for myself. I don't know what the consequences would be if word got out. Right now my heart is in a mess. How could I still have the mood to refine pills?" Guan Weiwu was surprised and immediately shouted, "Who dares to say that you did it for yourself? If anyone dares to say that, tell them to come find me. Everything was clearly arranged by me. So what are you worried about?" He then laughed mischievously and said, "Good disciple, come, refine a furnace for Master to see. Master will take care of everything else for you. so you don't need to worry. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.